Cybersecurity is in my blood. After serving in the Air Force Cybersecurity Division for 8 years, I transitioned to civilian life, but continued serving my country as a senior network defense analyst for Homeland Cyber Defense. My work involves identifying, tracking, and neutralizing threats to critical infrastructure networks, power grids, water systems, and other sensitive government systems. It is not the kind of job you leave at the office when you clock out. I purchased my home in Oak Ridge Estates 3 years ago. It was perfect, a modest two-story colonial with enough space for my home office in a quiet suburban neighborhood. American flags fluttered gently outside well-maintained homes lining streets named after trees. Children rode bikes on sidewalks, neighbors waved from porches, and sprinklers created rainbows on manicured lawns. The homeowner association kept the neighborhood looking pristine, which initially seemed worth the monthly fees. Setting up my home office required special consideration. My employment contract mandated specific security measures, reinforced doors, a dedicated circuit for my equipment, advanced encryption systems, and discrete cameras monitoring key points of entry. Nothing visually disruptive, just standard protections for someone who occasionally handles sensitive information from home. I received approval from my supervisor for the setup, which complied with all neighborhood regulations according to the HOA bylaws I had reviewed before purchase. The first 6 months in Oak Ridge were pleasant. I attended the annual summer barbecue, nodded hello on my morning runs, and participated in the neighborhood watch program, offering basic security tips without revealing my specific expertise. I met the HOA board members at a community gathering shortly after moving in. Most seemed reasonable, especially Tom, who shared my interest in grilling techniques, and Sarah, who appreciated my suggestions for the neighborhood watch program. But then there was Corinne Winters, the HOA president. She wore designer outfits to pick up her mail and drove a luxury SUV with a personalized license plate that read Enforcer. During our introduction, her smile never quite reached her eyes as she scanned my appearance with a calculating gaze. "We maintain very high standards here in Oak Ridge," she informed me, handing me her business card embossed with Corinne Winters, President, Oak Ridge Estates HOA, in bold letters. "I notice you have some equipment being installed. All external modifications require board approval, you know." I assured her that everything was compliant and held up my approved installation permits. She took them from my hand, photographed them with her phone without asking permission, and returned them with a tight smile. "We will see about that," she murmured before walking away. The neighborhood atmosphere began to shift in subtle ways. Community newsletters increasingly focused on security concerns and unauthorized technology. HOA monthly meetings added agenda items about surveillance equipment and communication devices. I noticed Corinne driving past my house with unusual frequency, slowing down to study my roof antenna and security cameras. Her interest intensified after a government vehicle delivered specialized equipment one Tuesday morning. While working from home one afternoon, I noticed her standing across the street, photographing my house. When I stepped outside to ask if she needed something, she quickly drove away. That evening, I checked my security footage and discovered she had circled my property 3 times that day, photographing from different angles. The storm clouds were gathering, but I had no idea how fierce the tempest would be. 6 months after moving in, an official-looking envelope marked "Urgent" appeared in my mailbox. It bore the Oak Ridge Estates letterhead and Corinne Winters' signature in aggressive blue ink. As I opened it, thunder rumbled in the distance, nature providing the perfect soundtrack for what was about to unfold. The letter was printed on expensive stationery with the HOA logo embossed in gold at the top. Notice of violation, unauthorized communications equipment. the heading declared in bold red letters. The body of the letter detailed concerns about my excessive and unauthorized technology installations, including my satellite dish, multiple antennas, and surveillance equipment. It claimed these installations violated community aesthetic standards and raised security concerns among residents. The letter demanded I remove all equipment within 72 hours or face daily fines of $150. I drafted a measured response that same evening. My email explained that all installations were within my rights as both a homeowner and a government contractor. I attached digital copies of my approved permits, relevant sections of the HOA bylaws confirming compliance, and a polite but firm explanation that my work required secure communications equipment. I concluded by offering to answer any reasonable questions about the visible aspects of my security setup, while noting that some details were classified due to the nature of my work. Karen responded within minutes. This matter requires immediate in-person discussion. The board will conduct an inspection tomorrow at 3 p.m. No question about my availability, no acknowledgement of my documentation, just a demand. I replied that I would be on a classified work call at that time and requested to reschedule, suggesting several alternative times later in the week. My request was met with silence. The following day at precisely 2:58 p.m., while I was indeed on a confidential video conference with my department, my doorbell began ringing repeatedly. On my security monitor, I could see Karen jabbing the button with increasing force, her perfectly manicured fingernail nearly bending with the pressure. Behind her stood Chuck, the HOA treasurer, looking visibly uncomfortable, clipboard clutched to his chest. "I need to call you back," I told my colleagues, muting the call. "HOA situation developing." My supervisor nodded knowingly. "Document everything," he advised before disconnecting. I opened the door with my most professional smile. Karen wore a cream pantsuit with a gold name badge that seemed unnecessarily large. She did not wait for a greeting. "We are here to inspect your communications equipment and Wi-Fi network," she announced, attempting to step inside without invitation. "The HOA has implemented new security protocols for all residents." I blocked the entrance politely but firmly. I did not agree to an inspection today. As I mentioned in my email, I am in the middle of work calls. Perhaps we could reschedule for. "This is not optional," Karen interrupted, her artificial sweetness barely masking her contempt. "As HOA president, I have the authority to inspect any external modifications and ensure they comply with our standards. We have also expanded our security measures to include wireless networks that could potentially compromise the neighborhood." Chuck nodded weakly behind her, avoiding eye contact. I remained calm despite my rising concern. "I am happy to discuss the external aspects of my security system, but I need to see the HOA regulation that authorizes inspection of private networks. That was not in the bylaws when I purchased my home." Karen thrust a clipboard toward me. "New amendment passed last month. Section 12.1 now includes wireless communication protocols under HOA jurisdiction. We need your network name and password to perform a standard security scan." The document looked official with signatures and stamps, but something seemed off about the formatting. I skimmed it quickly, my cybersecurity training immediately spotting several red flags. "I apologize, but I cannot provide my network credentials. As a Homeland cyber defense contractor, I am legally prohibited from sharing access to any network connected to government systems. Doing so would violate federal regulations and potentially compromise national security protocols." Corinne's eyes narrowed. Everyone else in the neighborhood has complied. What are you hiding? Nothing. This is standard security protocol, I explained. Perhaps I could help the HOA develop better neighborhood cybersecurity practices instead. I could host a workshop on protecting personal information and securing home networks. Chuck perked up. That actually sounds useful. We do not need lectures, Corinne snapped. We need compliance. Either you provide your network credentials for our routine inspection, or you will be in violation of HOA regulations. I maintained my composure. I understand your concern for neighborhood security, but what you are asking could literally be classified as an attempt to access protected government systems. That would be a federal offense. Corinne's demeanor shifted from demanding to threatening. Either you comply with our security protocols, or we will have to take further action. The fines start at $250 per day and double each week. She thrust a yellow highlighted notice into my hand. You have 48 hours to comply. Her heels clicked sharply as she turned and marched away, leaving Chuck to hurry after her like an apologetic shadow. As I closed the door, I noticed a new camera had been installed on the lamppost directly across from my house, pointed at my front door. The battle lines had been drawn. The moment the door closed, I began implementing what my colleagues and I called Protocol D, Document, Detail, Defend. I photographed the notice, logged the time and content of the conversation, and downloaded the security footage of the interaction. Years of cybersecurity work had taught me that meticulous documentation was often the difference between vulnerability and protection. My dining room table became command central over the next few days. I created a secure digital folder strew. Secure with subfolders for communications, legal references, timeline entries, and evidence. Each HOA interaction was time-stamped, transcribed, and cross-referenced. I printed the HOA bylaws, highlighting sections that contradicted Corinne's claims, and located my property deed with the exact covenants I had agreed to upon purchase. The harassment escalated with alarming speed. The day after refusing Corinne's demand, a new certified letter arrived claiming my security cameras violated neighbor privacy, despite being pointed exclusively at my own property. The following day, a notice about excessive electrical usage appeared on my door. By the end of the week, I had received complaints about everything from the color of my window blinds to the position of my garbage cans. My security cameras captured Corinne driving past my house 6 times one day, slowing each time to photograph my property. On 2 occasions, she parked across the street, appearing to take notes. Other board members began making unusual appearances in my cul-de-sac, often glancing uncomfortably at my house before hurrying away. The situation warranted professional consultation. I scheduled a secure video call with my supervisor, Director Matthews, sharing the growing documentation of harassment. "This is concerning on multiple levels, Alex," he said, his brow furrowed as he reviewed the materials. "Attempting to access your home network would constitute a serious security breach. These repeated attempts to enter your property could compromise our systems." "Should I escalate this officially?" I asked. "Not yet, but continue documenting everything. I will notify our legal department about the situation. In the meantime, verify that all your security protocols are at maximum strength. This may be simple HOA overreach, but we cannot risk exposure of the infrastructure projects you are monitoring." Following his advice, I upgraded my security system, adding motion sensors and enhancing my network firewall. I also began reaching out discreetly to neighbors, curious if others experienced similar treatment. My conversations revealed a pattern. Several homeowners shared stories of Karen's targeted enforcement, always against residents who questioned her authority or failed to show proper deference. Tom from across the street had been fined repeatedly after declining to use her husband's landscaping company. Elderly, Mrs. Chen received daily notices after voting against Karen at the last board election. Most neighbors spoke in hushed tones, fearful of becoming her next target. Through careful research and conversations with a longtime resident, I discovered Karen's background. Before becoming HOA president, she had launched a tech startup that failed spectacularly when investors discovered her technical credentials were largely fabricated. She had briefly worked as a low-level IT administrator at a local company, but was let go during restructuring. The HOA presidency seemed to be her attempt to regain control and authority, with my specialized equipment triggering both her resentment and curiosity. The situation reached a breaking point during my mandatory quarterly department meeting. Away from home for 8 hours, my phone alerted me to motion detection at my front door. The security feed showed Karen standing with a man carrying locksmith tools, both looking nervously over their shoulders. HOA emergency inspection, Karen was explaining to the locksmith. The homeowner has been notified but is refusing to correct critical violations. The locksmith looked doubtful. You have paperwork authorizing this, right? I cannot enter without proper. I am the HOA president, Karen interrupted, pointing to her oversized badge. This is official association business. As the locksmith reluctantly approached my door with his tools, my security system activated its automated response. Attention! This property is protected by a Level 4 security system. Unauthorized access attempts have been detected and are being recorded. Law enforcement has been automatically notified. Please step away from the door immediately. The bluff worked perfectly. No authorities had actually been called, but Karen and the locksmith fled immediately. The locksmith's van squealed away while Karen speed-walked to her SUV, looking frantically around as if expecting federal agents to descend. That evening, I returned home to find 5 violation notices taped to my door, each more absurd than the last. The most concerning was an official HOA violation, notice claiming I had implemented unauthorized security measures that threatened community safety. The fine, $500 per day until removed. Karen had clearly escalated from annoying to dangerous. My security footage showed her attempting to access my property without permission, a criminal offense. More troubling was her determination to access my network, which contained protected government information. What had begun as HOA overreach was now potentially entering the realm of federal security concerns. I decided it was time to move from documentation to action. An email blast announced an emergency HOA meeting focused on critical community security concerns. The message emphasized mandatory attendance, with a pointed note that non-attendance will be considered an admission of violations. The location was the community center, Tuesday at 7 p.m. I arrived early, selecting a seat with a clear view of both exits and the presentation screen. Neighbors filed in silently, many nodding to me with expressions ranging from sympathy to curiosity. The room filled quickly. Karen's crusades typically guaranteed attendance. She had arranged the folding chairs to face a podium positioned beneath harsh fluorescent lights, creating an atmosphere more suitable for an interrogation than a community meeting. At precisely 7 p.m., Karen strode in wearing a red blazer with her presidential badge prominently displayed. Chuck and 2 other board members followed like reluctant disciples. She tapped the microphone 3 times. The the feedback causing several residents to wince. "Thank you all for coming to this critical security meeting," she began, her voice carrying theatrical concern. "As your HOA president, my primary responsibility is ensuring Oak Ridge Estates remains safe, secure, and maintains its property values." The projector flickered to life, displaying a satellite image of our neighborhood with my house circled in alarming red. Over recent months, we have observed concerning activities that potentially threaten our community security. The presentation advanced to close-up images of my home, with yellow circles highlighting my security cameras, satellite dish, and roof antenna. Each was labeled with ominous descriptions: unauthorized surveillance equipment, unregistered communications device, and potential signal interceptor. Gasps and murmurs spread through the room as Karen continued. "This resident has installed extensive monitoring equipment without proper HOA approval. More concerning, they have refused mandatory security inspections of their wireless networks, inspections every other resident has complied with." This was news to several homeowners, who exchanged confused glances. I made note of who seemed surprised by this claim. "We have reason to believe this equipment could be used for unauthorized surveillance of neighbors, interception of private communications, or even hacking into personal information," Karen continued, her voice dropping to a stage whisper. When confronted, this resident has been hostile and uncooperative, citing supposed government work that conveniently cannot be verified. She clicked to a slide showing a grainy photograph of me accepting a delivery from the government vehicle months earlier. Suspicious activities continue with unmarked deliveries and unusual comings and goings. The misrepresentations were staggering. I remained calm, waiting for my turn to speak. "In conclusion," Karen announced, "the board proposes immediate enforcement action, daily fines until all unauthorized equipment is removed and networks opened for inspection. We must protect our community from potential surveillance and hacking activities." She scanned the room with the satisfaction of a prosecutor who had just delivered a winning closing argument. "Now, does the accused wish to respond before we vote?" I approached the microphone calmly, placing my government ID on the podium where observant neighbors could see it. "Thank you for your concern about neighborhood security. That is actually something I care deeply about as well." I introduced myself professionally, explaining my background in cybersecurity and current role with Homeland cyber defense without revealing classified details. All of my equipment was properly permitted before installation, complies with both local ordinances and HOA bylaws, and serves an important function for my work protecting critical infrastructure. Rather than becoming defensive, I offered a constructive alternative. "I understand the concerns about network security. As a professional in this field, I would be happy to conduct a free cybersecurity assessment for our entire neighborhood and provide recommendations to help everyone better protect their personal information." I outlined a workshop series I could lead on protecting against identity theft, securing home networks, and recognizing phishing attempts, actual threats far more relevant than my secured government equipment. Several neighbors nodded appreciatively. I could see Karen sensing her control slipping as murmurs of approval spread through the room. "That is not acceptable," she interrupted sharply. "Our bylaws require inspection. My compromise is this: supervised access to your network and equipment within 48 hours, or eviction proceedings begin immediately." The room divided visibly, some residents nodding along. With Karen, others looking disturbed by the overreach. An older gentleman stood up. "Is this legal? Can the HOA demand access to our private networks now? Karen waved the same clipboard she had shown me. New amendment approved last month. I do not recall voting on this, another homeowner called out. The meeting devolved into heated arguments. While attention was diverted, I quietly approached the HOA secretary. I would like to formally request copies of all HOA legal documentation, including meeting minutes for the amendment vote, proper notification procedures, and copies of all complaints filed against my property. The secretary glanced nervously at Karen before whispering, "I will email them to you tonight." True to her word, the documents arrived shortly after midnight. Surrounded by printed bylaws, amendment procedures, and voting records, I discovered what I had suspected: critical procedural violations in every aspect of Karen's campaign against me. The network inspection amendment had never been properly noticed to homeowners. The vote lacked quorum, and the language had been altered after the meeting. Most damningly, the secretary's notes revealed Karen's explicit targeting of my property before any alleged violations occurred. The path forward was becoming clear, illuminated by Karen's own procedural failures. First thing Monday morning, I contacted Patricia Hernandez, an attorney specializing in cybersecurity law whom I had met at an industry conference last year. Her reputation for handling cases at the intersection of property rights and digital security made her perfect for my situation. "This is not just HOA overreach, Alex," Patricia said after reviewing my documentation. "The attempt to access secured networks connected to government systems potentially violates several federal statutes. The unauthorized entry attempt is criminal trespass at minimum." She helped me organize my evidence chronologically, identifying specific violations of state property laws, HOA procedural requirements, and potential federal concerns. We scheduled a meeting with my department's legal team for the following day. The government attorney's reactions confirmed the seriousness of the situation. In a secure conference room at headquarters, 5 stone-faced lawyers reviewed my evidence while my supervisor explained the nature of my work and the classified systems potentially compromised by unauthorized access. "This crossed from annoying to legally actionable when she attempted to enter your property without permission," the lead counsel explained. "Adding the network access demands when your home connects to protected systems elevates this significantly." With their guidance, I began preparing a 3-pronged response: legal, educational, and protective. Patricia drafted a formal cease and desist letter citing specific violations of federal regulations, state laws, and HOA procedural requirements. The department provided an official letter explaining the national security implications of attempting to access protected networks without revealing classified details. I developed an educational presentation explaining actual cybersecurity threats versus imagined ones, using simple language and practical examples that neighborhood residents would understand. This would serve 2 purposes: genuinely helping my neighbors protect themselves while demonstrating my professional expertise and good faith community engagement. Back home, I printed the cease and desist letter, each violation highlighted with corresponding legal consequences, and prepared documentation packages for every board member. The evidence was overwhelming: procedural violations in HOA amendments, failure to follow voting protocols, selective enforcement of rules, and most seriously, attempts to illegally access a property connected to government systems. I spent the next several days visiting neighbors, especially those who had seemed uncomfortable during the emergency meeting. Without mentioning specific allegations against Karen, I asked about their experiences with HOA management and network inspection demands. She said everyone had agreed to the network inspections, Mrs. Chen told me, looking confused. I never agreed to that. I do not even understand what that means. Similar conversations revealed that most residents had never been approached about network inspections. Those who had received such requests had denied them, despite Karen's claims of universal compliance. Several homeowners signed affidavits describing their own experiences with Karen's intimidation tactics and selective rule enforcement. My doorbell camera captured Karen driving by my house 14 times over 3 days. Each pass was logged and added to the documentation. The situation appeared to be building toward another confrontation, but I was now prepared. The turning point came 4 nights later, while working late on a critical infrastructure protection assessment. My security system alerted me to an unauthorized access attempt on my home network. The intrusion detection system immediately isolated the attack while logging its source. The logs were unmistakable. Multiple attempts to penetrate my network firewall originating from an IP address registered to Karen Winters. I immediately contacted my supervisor through our secure channel. We have an active intrusion attempt from the HOA president's home network. Within minutes, our department's cybersecurity response team began monitoring the situation remotely, capturing forensic evidence of each attempt. Karen was not particularly sophisticated. She appeared to be using basic network scanning tools and password cracking software available online, revealing her limited technical abilities despite her claims of expertise. This is no longer a neighborhood dispute, my supervisor said grimly. This is attempted unauthorized access of protected government systems, a federal offense. The evidence continued mounting as Karen made multiple attempts over the next 2 hours, each more aggressive than the last. The intrusion attempts were clumsy but determined, targeting ports and services connected to my work systems. Our team tracked and documented every attempt without alerting her to our awareness. By morning, my home office had transformed into an evidence collection center. Network logs, timestamps, IP address verification, and attack signatures were meticulously documented. The attempted network intrusion shifted the entire situation from annoying HOA overreach to potential federal cybercrime. Just as we finished compiling this new evidence, a process server arrived at my door with papers threatening a lien on my property for accumulated HOA fines, now totaling over $12,000. The notice demanded payment within 10 days or foreclosure proceedings would begin. An emergency board meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening to address ongoing violations and vote on property lien enforcement. Karen had escalated to her most aggressive move yet, not realizing she had simultaneously committed a federal offense that transformed the entire situation. She believed she was moving in for the kill. In reality, she had just triggered a trap of her own making. I called Patricia immediately. We need to accelerate our timeline and bring the federal evidence. The board meeting would not go as Karen expected. Thunder rumbled as rain pounded against the community center windows. Weather forecasts had predicted a major storm system, but the real tempest was about to unfold inside. I arrived precisely 15 minutes early, accompanied by Patricia in her most formal charcoal suit and Jordan Weber, a representative from Homeland Security's Cybercrime Division, who had been dispatched once the network intrusion evidence was verified. We selected seats directly across from the board table, placing 3 matching leather portfolios precisely aligned before us. Other homeowners trickled in, shaking off umbrellas and speaking in hushed tones as they noticed my professional companions. Karen entered from a side door with the other board members, faltering momentarily when she saw my legal team before composing her features into a mask of authority. This emergency session of the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association is now in session, she announced, striking a small gavel against the table. Our primary agenda item concerns ongoing violations at 1456 Maple Avenue and the enforcement of accumulated fines through property lien. Karen began confidently, projecting images of my property with various circles and annotations highlighting alleged violations. She spoke about property values, community standards, and the importance of compliance. Charts detailed the accumulation of daily fines, now totaling $12,750, with a breakdown showing the various categories of violations. Despite multiple notices and generous opportunities to comply, the homeowner has remained obstinate, Karen concluded. We therefore recommend immediate filing of the property lien with escalation to foreclosure if payment is not received within 30 days. Board members nodded along, though I noticed Chuck shifting uncomfortably in his seat. Karen turned to me with practiced condescension. You may make a brief statement before the board votes, though I must advise that the decision has been thoroughly considered based on overwhelming evidence. I approached the table calmly, placing my government identification card before me. Thank you for this opportunity. I would like to introduce Patricia Hernandez, my legal counsel, and Jordan Weber from the Department of Homeland Security Cybercrime Division. A murmur rippled through the room as Jordan displayed his federal credentials. Karen's expression flickered briefly before she regained composure. With respect, this is an HOA matter, not a federal one, she interjected. It became a federal matter at exactly 11:42 p.m. last Tuesday, I replied evenly, when you began your first of 17 attempts to illegally access a secured government network. The room fell silent. I opened my laptop and connected it to the projector, replacing Karen's violation images with network logs showing intrusion attempts originating from her home IP address. Each entry was time-stamped and highlighted, with translations of the technical data into layman's terms. These logs document systematic attempts to breach a secured network connected to critical infrastructure protection systems, I explained calmly. The attacks originated from 1442 Maple Avenue, your residence, Ms. Winters. Karen's face flushed crimson. This is preposterous. I demand you remove this slanderous presentation immediately. Patricia stood. These logs have been verified by federal cybersecurity experts and are admissible in both civil and criminal proceedings. They establish a pattern of targeted attacks against a system clearly marked as government property. I continued methodically through the evidence, explaining each attempt in terms the room could understand. This particular signature shows an attempt to exploit a common vulnerability to gain administrative access, the digital equivalent of picking a lock on a secure government facility. Jordan added, unauthorized access attempts against protected government systems violate multiple federal statutes with penalties including up to 10 years imprisonment per occurrence. Board members exchanged alarmed glances, physically distancing themselves from Karen. Chuck spoke up tentatively. Karen, did you actually do this? Of course not, she snapped. He is obviously fabricating this technical mumbo-jumbo to distract from his violations. I displayed the network registration information connecting the attacks to her home, followed by satellite tracking data confirming the location. The evidence has been independently verified by 3 separate federal agencies. Karen's composure cracked entirely. I was just checking if his network was secure. As HOA president, I have every right to verify neighborhood compliance. Her inadvertent confession silenced the room. Patricia addressed the board directly. Each board member bears personal legal liability for these actions if you continue to support them. The attempted property access alone constitutes criminal trespass. The network intrusion attempts qualify as potential cyberterrorism when targeting protected infrastructure systems. I produced the final document, an official letter on Department of Homeland Security letterhead explaining the national security implications of the HOA's demands. This letter confirms that my home network contains connections to systems monitoring critical infrastructure. Attempting to force access to these systems is not just against HOA bylaws, it potentially threatens national security protocols. The board members turned to Karen with expressions ranging from shock to anger. The secretary was the first to speak. "You told us everyone had agreed to network inspections. You said this was about property values and aesthetics. And you never mentioned trying to enter his property without permission," Chuck added, his voice hardening. Karen attempted to regain control, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. "As president, I have authority to." "You do not have authority to commit federal crimes in our name," the secretary interrupted, sliding her chair further from Karen. I concluded by placing my comprehensive response before each board member. Documentation of procedural violations in amendment processes, evidence of selective enforcement, signed affidavits from other residents, the cease and desist letter, and finally, the official security notification from Homeland Defense. "I am not asking for special treatment," I explained. "I simply request the board respect both federal regulations and its own bylaws. All my installations were properly permitted and comply with regulations in place when I purchased my home." The room remained silent for nearly 30 seconds before Chuck cleared his throat. "I move that we adjourn this meeting immediately and reconvene in executive session to address these serious allegations." The motion passed unanimously, with Karen's mouth still hanging open in shock. The transformation occurred with remarkable speed. Within 24 hours, the board called an emergency executive session from which Karen was recused due to conflict of interest. By the following afternoon, a certified letter arrived at my door containing a full retraction of all violation notices and a formal apology from the board. All fines were canceled, and a note at the bottom indicated that the board had voted unanimously to request Karen's resignation, which she had provided for personal reasons. 1 week later, sunlight streamed through the community center windows as the reconst. Idooted HOA board met with residents. Chuck, now serving as interim president, opened the session with a very different tone than previous meetings. "Before we address regular business, I want to formally acknowledge and apologize for the inappropriate actions taken against one of our residents," he began, his voice steady and sincere. "The board failed in its duty to fairly enforce our regulations and allowed personal agendas to interfere with proper governance." The formal apology was entered into the permanent HOA records. More importantly, the board had undertaken a complete review of all recent enforcement actions, finding numerous instances of selective enforcement against residents who had opposed Karen in various ways. "As part of our commitment to rebuilding trust," Chuck continued, "we are implementing several new measures effective immediately. These measures included returning to the original HOA bylaws without unauthorized amendments, establishing a transparent process for rule modifications requiring proper notice and legitimate votes, creating an appeals process for violations, and most significantly, adopting a new privacy protection amendment I had helped draft. Additionally, Chuck announced, we have accepted an incredibly generous offer from one of our residents, a cybersecurity expert, to conduct workshops on protecting personal information. 2 weeks later, I hosted the first neighborhood cybersecurity workshop. Nearly 40 residents attended, laptops in hand, eager to learn about password security, recognizing phishing attempts, securing home networks, and protecting children online. The session ended with practical demonstrations and one-on-one assistance for seniors who struggled with technology. The genuine appreciation on their faces confirmed that something positive had emerged from the conflict. As for Karen, the consequences of her actions extended beyond losing her precious HOA presidency. While the federal authorities ultimately declined to prosecute, determining that her actions stemmed from misguided authority rather than genuine national security threats, the attempted network intrusion violated her professional licensing in the financial industry. Brief notices appeared in local papers about her resignation from her financial advisory position under regulatory scrutiny. She listed her house for sale within a month and moved away without saying goodbye to anyone. The neighborhood transformed visibly after her departure. Residents who previously hurried from cars to homes now lingered to chat with neighbors. The community garden, long neglected under Karen's leadership, bloomed with shared vegetables and flowers. Children played freely on front lawns without parents nervously watching for roaming HOA inspectors. Most evenings now, I enjoy sitting on my front porch with my laptop, working on less classified projects while neighbors walk by with friendly waves. Tom often stops to share grilling tips, and Mrs. Chen brings by homemade dumplings to thank you for standing up to the dragon lady, as she puts it with a wink. The HOA still exists, still maintains our community standards, but now operates with transparency and respect for boundaries. My security cameras and equipment remain undisturbed, serving their important purpose without controversy. The new board occasionally consults me on legitimate security matters, which I'm happy to assist with when appropriate. This experience taught me that standing firm against overreach protects not just individual rights, but everyone's right to security and privacy. Sometimes expertise becomes a shield not just for yourself, but for an entire community. The proper use of knowledge and authority should be to protect and serve, whether that means defending national infrastructure or simply defending the right to secure your own home. As the sun sets over Oak Ridge Estates these days, the only inspection of my Wi-Fi is the one I conduct myself, ensuring it remains exactly what it should be: secure, private, and uncompromised.